Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Tropics Talk. Meteorologist Jim Dickey here in the ABC 7 Hurricane Center. This morning we are tracking potential Tropical Cyclone 6. At least that's still the name it has as I'm recording this. By the time you're watching this, could very well be Tropical Storm Fred. There's the 8 o'clock intermediary advisory, winds 35 miles per hour. System is moving to the west-northwest pretty quickly for a tropical system at 17 miles per hour. Now, what does that name mean? Potential tropical cyclone. Hurricane Center started doing this a couple seasons ago. Basically, it allows them to start issuing advisories as they would a tropical storm or hurricane before a depression, storm, or hurricane actually forms. When they think it's going to, and they don't have enough lead time to wait to put out those tropical storm watches and warnings, which are out now for parts of the islands there, Puerto Rico and Hispaniola. But they're still waiting for evidence that there's a low-level closed circulation with this. They haven't been able to find it just yet, but just now, as I speak, the hurricane hunters are just getting into the outer fringes of the cloud shield, flying their way in there. In fact, this was the latest observation they just put through, the surface wind at 36 miles per hour. It's pretty high pressure at 10, 16 millibars, so we'll see. I will say, as I look at the satellite presentation this morning, it's not looking quite as impressive. Now we're back in Southwest Florida. Bear with me for a second as I try to get this together for you. It's not looking quite as impressive as it did going back to yesterday, at least in my opinion. There's more of a sort of banding going on with it, as opposed to that well-defined, what looked to be the central dense overcast starting to form up over what it appeared like was trying to be its center. As I put this lapse in, and you're going to notice it jump around as the floater is moving the satellite. Note, again, most of the cloud coverage, most of the thunderstorm activity, if we assume the center was marked right about there from the Hurricane Center's latest update, you have all of your heavy thunderstorm activity displaced off to the north and the northwest. No surprise, as you look in the outer fringes here, see these clouds here, they're starting to move northward. This is starting to move into an area of higher wind shear, and so I think we are seeing that wind shear starting to affect it, moving it northward. I think also, as you'll note, sort of this clearing area going on here. Right there, there's sort of some clearing. I think we're seeing the first evidence of some dry air being ingested into the broader circulation of this system. That being said, as we zoom out, you're seeing some clear upper-level clockwise flow going on. These streamers, as I get my pencil back on here, going out in a clockwise formation. It's starting to vent aloft. That's a sign it's stacking itself vertically. High pressure is setting up over the broad low pressure at the surface. That warm air is being lifted up, that warm ocean air being lifted up and then vented out the upper level high pressure, which is the structure a tropical system wants to take. So again, there's indications both ways. It's all going to come down to what does the hurricane hunter find in the next hour to 2 hours here as it flies around that storm to see if this gets upgraded. But regardless, the Hurricane Center says it will, in all likelihood, be a tropical storm as it noses towards Puerto Rico later on here today. Still, for the reasons we just talked about, I think we're going to keep a lid on it intensity-wise in the near term. There's your dry air, this area of deep orange that stretches over the western end of Puerto Rico and now south of the system. Yesterday, that dry air was all off to the north and west, so I think clearly that circulation has drawn that dry air southward, and I do think you're seeing it punch in a little bit on the south side. That's why there's no convection whatsoever on the southern end of the circulation. Anytime that dry air gets ingested, that's going to help, again, to weaken it a bit, to help that thunderstorm activity collapse. And there's your wind shear, that area of red, the south-southwesterly shear that will be picking up as this works its way further westward towards Hispaniola. You know, shear is a deterring factor. It takes that system that wants to be vertically stacked and tilts it, which keeps it from reaching its more, ideal form. And then, of course, anytime we talk about a system coming through the Caribbean, we talk about the high terrain. If this goes directly over Hispaniola, which, as I'll show you in just a second, a number of models show, it's going to have a tough time sustaining any type of core that is developed before it reaches that. We're talking 10,000-foot mountaintops there. There's some models that also show this going over parts of Puerto Rico, which would have a weakening effect, perhaps even over Cuba, which would have a weakening effect. So lots of land interactions in general, lots of hurdles here over the next 48 to 72 hours that should keep a lid on it intensity-wise. Look at the track forecasts. A few sort of shoot the gap between Puerto Rico and Hispaniola. That would allow this to be a stronger storm, but note, those are the TABS models, which frankly I'm not even sure why I have them on here, because they tend to be outliers in most cases. Most show this going right over those high mountaintops I just showed you in Hispaniola, perhaps staying on the northern side of the DR, where the elevation's a little bit lower, but still a long time over land to break down the core a little bit, emerging back into the water. Most models have this avoiding Cuba, going across the Florida Straits, and then into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, Florida Straits onward, conditions will become a little more ripe. It gets away from the shear, the waters are plenty warm, the dry air will likely be gone. All indications are this will try to ramp up. I think the big question is, what are we dealing with once this moves its way out of Hispaniola? Is this still a tropical depression? Is this just an open wave of low pressure at this point? Does this even maintain tropical storm force? I think that's going to go a long way towards determining the intensity forecast. Now note, these have all come up a little bit in the past 24 hours, but you're seeing a general trend. Everything strengthens this. All the models more or less strengthen this in the near term, the next 12 to 24 hours prior to interactions with Hispaniola. Then just about every line takes a downturn in intensity, most going all the way below tropical storm strength. That red line you see is actually the GFS forecast model. It does break this down into a wave, so I'll show you in just a second, an open wave of low pressure. But then just about every single model shows an uptick in intensity, some all the way towards hurricane strength, and that would be as the center gets into the Gulf of Mexico, the warm waters there, the more ideal conditions there, calling for a strengthening storm. And that's more or less what the Hurricane Center calls for. Here's their latest cone of concern forecast, showing this becoming Tropical Storm Fred later today, staying just south of Puerto Rico. They're going right over Hispaniola, breaking down to a tropical depression, but avoiding land in Cuba for the most part. Again, when you look at the cone of concern, that width is determined before the season. It's determined by average forecast error. And history tells us the center could still be over Cuba or even further north into the Bahamas by the time we get to Friday. To the Florida Straits, potentially a landfall in the Keys early Saturday, and then close to or over the coast to southwest Florida, the Florida Gulf Coast, going through Saturday into early Sunday morning. Again, cone of concern, especially once you get all the way out to 120 hours. We're talking a 200-mile average forecast error. This could be anywhere from the East Coast to all the way out there in the central Gulf of Mexico by the time we get to Sunday. But most models do show a fairly close pass to southwest Florida. And now I want to show you that GFS forecast model. There you go. Keeps it fairly weak in the near term, first off. Moves this over Hispaniola, and by the time we get to early Thursday morning, you just have a subtle shifting of the winds. That's it. That would be all that is left of that system by the time we get to there. But it sort of maintains at least some semblance of that wave, moves it over the Florida Straits by Saturday evening. So again, still at this point in time, this wouldn't even be a tropical depression, but it does ramp things back up, closes off low pressure, and moves this on shore in the Panhandle as, at the very least, a tropical storm. Earlier runs showed this even a little bit stronger, intensifying, moving into the Panhandle. And even though in this forecast model, this is a fairly weak system, it still drops quite a bit of rainfall. There's the GFS model of the rainfall in southwest Florida, a good 2 to 4 inches, especially by the coast, lesser amounts inland. Not quite what we saw with Elsa, of course, because I don't think we get that same banding setup to occur like we did, but still a good soaking that could lead to localized flooding. And the European model on board with that, even showing more rain offshore, but a broad 2 to 4 inches falling. So I think that's the main threat at this point in time that we have to worry about here in southwest Florida. Heavy rain and the potential for localized flooding, especially with how saturated the ground already is here in southwest Florida with our recent rainfall so far this month. At this point, the wind threat looking pretty low. But if this, say, misses Hispaniola and remains a tropical storm, I could easily see this ramping up, sort of like Elsa did, all the way towards Category 1 hurricane strength right offshore. And that would, of course, up our chances to see some stronger winds. But I do think even in that scenario, the worst of the winds would likely be kept to the coast. Something to watch at this point for sure. And then coastal flooding, especially at high tide If this comes together as a strong tropical storm like the Hurricane Center shows offshore, we will be talking onshore winds for a couple of hours at high tide. We could see some minor storm surge flooding at any time. We're talking a nearby or landfalling tropical system. We have to think about the threat for severe weather and tornadoes. So bottom line, this is a storm that you should be paying attention to closely here over the next couple of days. Be sure you have your hurricane kit together, and be sure you're keeping tabs on the forecast. We'll, of course, have frequent updates in the coming days here on this on-air and online. We'll keep you abreast of the latest. We'll continue to home in on the exact impacts and the timing that we can expect. And that continues tonight. Chief Meteorologist John Patrick, he will have the latest for you on ABC 7 News at 6, 7, and 11. Of course, I'll be back on air tomorrow morning, and I'll be back with another Tropics Talk tomorrow as well. So be sure to tune in for that. Until then, I'm Meteorologist Jim Dickey. Have a great day.